Your first assessment task is to develop a sequence of 3 lesson plans that you will then teach to a small group of students in your placement classroom. The first thing that you will need to do is to work with your teacher mentor in the classroom to identify which group of children you'll be working with, and secondly, what focus will you use as the basis of your 3 lesson plans. So what will be the topic or the theme, the particular concept or the skill that your teacher mentor would like you to teach this particular group of students over a sequence of 3 lessons. We want you to work individually on this assignment. Initially, we had suggested that, like last semester, you could work with your buddy, but we are going to be assessing your lesson plans individually. So you might choose to work with your buddy to cooperate with and help each other in the development of your lesson plans, but they will be different sets of lessons with different children that you'll be working with. We want you to annotate the lesson plans. So once you've developed the lesson plans, we want you to annotate them. And by that, we mean add some extra notes on the side of your lesson plan that highlight what you have done in your planning to create a safe learning environment, to be supportive of the students that you are teaching, to show how you have included everybody in your small group in your lesson, and how you have acted to engage them in the learning. So we want you to specifically highlight what strategies or approaches you have included in your lesson plan that address those 4 characteristics of an effective learning environment. We also want you to show evidence, show evidence of how you've made use of the information from your learner biographies, which I'll explain in the next slide. So how the information from the learner biographies has informed your planning. So that's another set of annotations we'd like you to make on the lesson plan. At the core of your lesson plans will be the learner biographies that we are asking you to construct for 2 of the students in your small group that you will teach. A learner biography, for the purpose of this assignment, is a description, a fairly rich description of the learner in your small group that you have constructed from a range of evidence that you have collected about the learner. We're asking you to divide your learner biography into 3 sections. Section A is about the learner and their learning. Where are they at with their learning? Draw upon samples of the students' work to show you where they're up to with their learning. Look at various assessments that your teacher mentor may have already set that help you make judgments about where the student is up to with their learning. What do their reports say? Perhaps their mid-year school report. What does their NAPLAN test results tell you about their learning in the particular focus area that your teacher mentor has asked you to use as the basis of your 3 lesson plans? What have you been able to observe, or from your audits, what have you seen about this student that helps you to describe and summarise their learning? Section B focuses on the learning habits of your particular learner. What's their stamina like? How long can they retain focus and be on task? How easily distracted might they be? How well do they work in groups, or do they not work well in groups? How much of a perfectionist might your student be? Or perhaps your student might be quite slapdash where near enough is good enough. Try and identify their particular learning habits Once again, drawing upon your observations and audits to give you evidence of their approaches to learning. Part C, the third part, is about the whole learner. And this is where a lot of the work that we've been doing at university in our first 3 workshops will play a role. What happens beyond the classroom that affects that particular child, that particular student of yours? What are their relationships like with the other students? What's happening beyond the classroom, for example, at home, that might come with that student to the class and affect their learning capacity? For example, what might be happening in the playground? Are there equity considerations, or what I've referred to as dimensions of difference? For example, are there gender issues or ethnicity issues, religious issues, ability issues that might be placing those students as in or out or even in between? Again, you're drawing upon your observations and your audits to provide evidence of the judgments that you are making about this particular student. We're asking you to do a learner biography in this level of detail for 2 students in your small group that you will teach the sequence of 3 lessons to. Work with your teacher mentor to identify which 2 students will be your focus. We're suggesting that 3 to 4 detailed paragraphs for each student will be sufficient. We want you to use the information in these learner biographies to help you plan your sequence of 3 lessons. You'll also use your learner biographies in your second assessment task, where you write a report on the progress with their learning that these 2 students have made. So your learner biography will help you establish what we call a baseline. You know where the student is at. You need to know that before you can do 2 things. Before you can plan where you want to extend their learning, and you need to know where they are at before you can make judgments about how much progress they have made with their learning. So that's what the learner biography is aiming to achieve, is for you to establish a baseline. When we say we want you to get to know the learner, we want you to get to know them at this level. What we want you to do for the assignment, though, is to present it in the following way. We want the 3 annotated lesson plans attached at the beginning, on top of your assignment. We then want your learner biography to be a supporting document for those lesson plans. The learner biography starts with a cover page. And on the cover page, you'll type in the learner name and what grade they're in. Then what we want you to do in this table here is to list the sorts of data that you've collected. And in each row, you identify a different source of data. For example, the first data that you've collected could be your conversations with the student. And you might then use that particular source of data for the whole learner section of your learner biography. Your second context, your data source, might be the playground observation. Again, that might go in with the whole learner section of your learner biography. So we don't want you in this table putting down what the data actually is. You're identifying what the data is, when it was collected, why you collected it, how you collected it. So a conversation with the student on the way into the classroom in the morning. The playground observation on day 3 of placement at recess, watching the child play in a group, for example. We want you to add as many rows as you need depends on how many sources of data you collect. And tell us which section of the learner biography you've made use of that. Some forms of data you might use in more than one section of your learner biography. I would imagine that the interview with your mentor you might use data from that interview in all three sections. If you're looking at the student's NAPLAN results, for example, that might just go in the About the Learner section. It's not relevant for the whole learner. But remember here, only include data that is relevant to the biography and the lesson plan. If your sequence of lesson plans relates to literacy, there's no point in putting any information in here about their numeracy learning. It's not relevant. So make sure that the data that you collect relates to the topics and themes or concepts or skills that form the basis of your sequence of lesson plans. This is an illustration of what we mean when we're talking about an annotated lesson plan. I have cut and pasted some of the Ned Kelly lesson plan from semester 1 into the lesson plan template. I've added a few little things just to use as fairly simplistic examples. We'd be expecting something a little more meaningful than this potentially. So, for example, in the teacher action section here, I've added that I welcome the lesson plan states, I welcome each student into the class acknowledging something positive about each individual student. Since yesterday was Eid, I will ask my Muslim students about their celebration. So that's what I have planned to do in my lesson, taking into account my knowledge of the students in my group. What I've done is use the review function in Word to insert a comment. And that's what we're suggesting that you do. You could also use text boxes, but I find the insert comment function perhaps a little friendlier and easier to use. And what I've said here in my annotation is that I'm acknowledging a significant cultural celebration as an example of being inclusive every day rather than just on rare occasions. Down here, I've identified that when we're brainstorming some question stems as a whole class in the body of the lesson, that this is an example of how I've created supports for the students. By brainstorming together, I was able to demonstrate some ideas that help the students achieve their learning goals. So I was modelling, and that I see as being supportive or providing some supports. Just two small examples of how you might annotate your lesson plans.